All right, time to go teach. Hello and welcome to the final video of our first unit, Understanding Biology. Today, our goal is to actually look at what the study of biology is all about. What do the scientists who study biology look at? That's our goal. The targets explain what a biologist studies. Next, describe and explain the different characteristics of life. And then finally, the last target for the day is for you to be able to identify, is something alive or not? That's where we're going. So biologists, what do they study? Well, the first thing is they study life and the factors that affect life. What are those factors? Well, those factors come in two different flavors. They're either biotic factors or they are abiotic factors. Bio means life, so biotic factors are factors that are alive. Abiotic factors are factors that are not alive. So those are the two groups of factors that a biologist can study, all focused on how that affects something that is alive. Whether it's about looking at single-celled organisms and how they interact with much larger multi-celled organisms, or trying to come up with a vaccine to defeat some sort of a virus, or studying specific organisms like chimpanzees, or studying how all the different cells within a multicellular organism have to communicate to form that multicellular organism, or my favorite scientist here, yes, that's my awesome wife, studying how sleep affects learning and memory. So biologists study all sorts of things, going from the microscopic to much larger scale to how different organisms of a very large size impact each other, and how different things like weather patterns impact those organisms. It's a vast, vast, vast field of science, and anyone can find something in it that they're interested in. And maybe you come up with a really great discovery like each one of these individuals, and you could end up on a slide for some teacher someday. So just think, you could be like any of these great biologists. The thing to understand as we go through and look at what a biologist studies is, since they study life, we have to understand what makes up life, and that means the characteristics of life. There are 8 different characteristics of life, and for something to be alive, it has to have all 8. It can't be missing anything, otherwise it's not alive. The first characteristic is it must be made of cells. Cells are the little factories that make life. That's what they do. They are all about making life. It doesn't matter if it's a plant cell, if it's a bacterium, if it's an animal cell, they are the fundamental unit that makes life. Next, all life uses energy. And we typically think about that as the metabolism of the organism. So the metabolism is all the chemical reactions that take place within an organism. That could be digestion, which would be a catabolic reaction. That's a reaction that breaks things down. So as you consume food and you break it down, that's a catabolic reaction. Or it could be about growing bigger, building that organism up, and that would be anabolic reactions. The combination of catabolic and anabolic reactions are the metabolism of a specific organism. Or it could be that the organism has to respond to a stimuli. Now that stimuli doesn't have to be something conscious. It doesn't have to be something like someone calling your name and then you turn. It could be as simple as the light intensity changing, and that causes your pupil to either dilate or contract. It is going to respond to that light so you can see in the best way possible. So the stimulus in that sense would be the intensity of light. If you're shining a light and it is not within the visible spectrum, then that doesn't count as a stimulus for us. So the stimulus has to be something that the organism can actually receive. If the signal is not something that the organism can receive, then it doesn't count as being a stimulus. All organisms must also be able to reproduce. This is because no organism lives forever. So organisms have to be able to reproduce for that specific type of organism to continue on and on and on and on and on. They either reproduce asexually, where you have a single parent making copies of itself, or you happen to have sexual reproduction where you have two parents which are going to fuse gametes together. Those are specialized cells which are going to carry the genetic information of the parents so they can join together and make the offspring. All life also grows and develops. In this example, we have the frog eggs, which are going to hatch and become a tadpole. That tadpole is going to grow and develop until it becomes an adult frog. And that adult frog will have to find another adult frog where that they can mate, and then they can produce eggs and fertilize the eggs. And then we end up with tadpoles again. And this whole cycle goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Now, not everything has to develop in such an extreme way as going from a tadpole to an adult frog. Not every organism is obviously going to have this larval stage to the adult stage. But all organisms are definitely going to grow in size, and that's going to help them to develop to the point where they are able to reproduce. All life also contains DNA. DNA is the genetic basis of all of life. This is the code that tells your cells what to make and how to exist. This, right here, it is the code for your life. Next, all organisms are also going to be able to adapt and evolve. Adaptations just mean that they're going to obtain a characteristic that helps them survive, whatever that characteristic might be. It doesn't have to be a genetic characteristic. It could just be a learned behavior. That would be an adaptation. Evolution, that has to be a genetic change that is then going to go through the population, and that is going to then have an impact over a long period of time. And so we'll look a lot more at evolution when we get to our second to last unit, which is evolution. So we'll talk a lot more about this when we get there. And then last characteristic, it has to maintain homeostasis, which is an internal environment that is stable. Okay? Now, a lot of times people talk about a stable internal environment, and they talk about humans, and they talk about our body temperature. I'm going to say that that is a really lousy way to think about homeostasis, because the trees outside, they don't maintain their body temperature. My pet turtle and my pet fish don't maintain their internal body temperature, but they're all still alive, all right? The thing about it is, all life has to maintain what goes in, what goes out, and keep it stable. It can't have an excess of water going in. If a cell has an excess of water going in, it'll burst. It also can't have an excess of water going out, because then it will shrivel and it will not be able to do the functions it's supposed to do. And it's not just water. The different gases, oxygen, carbon dioxide, those levels must be maintained. Salts within our body, whether it's sodium or whether it's going to be potassium or whatever those different chemicals are, they need to be maintained in stable amounts inside the cell. If the internal environment of the cell is not maintained, you don't have life, period. So here's a question. This is an eastern box turtle. I found it outside when I was actually gathering the termites. I just stumbled across them. And so the question is it alive? All right, I know, you already know this one. It's really straightforward. Yes, it is made of cells. It's an animal. Animals are made of cells. Yes, it uses energy. That's why the turtle is going to go around and consume different things. One of the purposes of consuming material, in other words, eating, is so it has energy. Yes, it responds to stimuli. That's why it's actually like sort of stuck its head in a little bit there. That's because when I went in to get a picture, it pulled back. Yes, turtles absolutely reproduce. They lay eggs. And so this turtle actually, going into growing and develop, it started off in an egg about this size, and then it grew to a turtle that was about that big. So it absolutely grows and develops. Over time, yes, it does. It contains DNA, absolutely. Every single one of the cells that that turtle is made of has DNA within it. That is passed on from its parents. Yes, it also, as a population, the turtles have evolved and adapted over time. There are changes that have occurred for the eastern box turtle that we can talk about when we get to that unit. And lastly, yes, it absolutely maintains homeostasis. And this is, of course, no surprise to any of you. Box turtles, well, this one in particular, but yes, it is alive, okay? So box turtles are living organisms. And how about this? This is something called lichen. That's L-I-C-H-E-N, not spelled like the werewolves, right? So this is, something, and it is on top of a piece of wood, a piece of fence post, actually. Is it alive? Yeah, there's no fooling you. Of course, I wouldn't just be showing this if it wasn't. So despite the fact that it doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot, yes, lichen is alive. All right, next. Is it alive? All right, these are little bacteria. All right. So to start off, of course, yes, little bacteria, they are single cells, so we know that they are made of one or more cells. That's the first thing, and that's a huge, crucial key. Once you know that it's made of one or more cells, you pretty much know it falls into the rest of these things, because cells always use energy. Cells are going to respond to stimuli. Cells are going to reproduce. Cells are going to grow and develop. Cells all contain DNA. Cells always evolve and adapt over time. And yes, all cells must maintain homeostasis because cells are alive. So, absolutely, these rod-shaped bacteria, they are alive. And now for the last one. Is it alive? And this is a virus. Is it alive? The first thing is, no, they're not made of cells. So no, viruses are not alive. They're not made of cells. They don't use energy. They can't respond to stimuli at all. They don't actually reproduce on their own. A virus, the only way that a virus can reproduce is by using the cell that it is infected's machinery to reproduce. So what actually happens is the virus is made by the cell that it infected. So viruses, they don't actually reproduce on their own. They don't grow and develop. They do, some contain DNA. And well, some only contain RNA. So not all viruses actually contain DNA, but some do. So I put a check mark there. Over time, yes, viruses evolve over time. But again, it's not because they're reproducing themselves. It's actually because of the faulty copies that your cell makes. When your cells make the different copies, they mess up and don't make exact copies always. So that's how a virus actually evolves. It's not the virus doing it. It's our cells or the cells of the organism that it infects changing the virus. And no, they don't maintain homeostasis. There is no stable internal environment within a virus. So, as it turns out, no, viruses are not alive. And so you can't kill a virus because it was never alive. You can destroy a virus, which is something that we are actively looking at doing, but you can't kill it because you can't kill something that was never alive. So in summary, what do we got here? Biologists, they study life, they study the factors that affect life. That is the goal of every single biologist, and it's such a vast amount of topics that fall under the umbrella of biology. So hopefully, you can find something in biology that you find to be completely fascinating and awesome. And you can study it and become an awesome biologist. And all organisms exhibit all of the characteristics of life. If anything is missing, even one of those characteristics of life, it's not alive. You need to have all of those check marks happening. Otherwise, it's not alive. That's it for this unit. You made it. Next unit will be biochemistry. Until then, be awesome, stay awesome.